When my husband, Richard, told me he was leaving, I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes from the Sunday dinner I had prepared for our son Daniel and his wife Jessica. My hands were submerged in soapy water, and I remember watching a piece of lettuce circle the drain as he spoke the words that would split my life into before and after. "I'm in love with someone else, Margaret. Her name is Amber. She's 28. I'm moving out this weekend." I was 61 years old. We had been married for 38 years. The green ceramic plate I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered against the stainless steel sink. Richard didn't even flinch. He just stood there in the doorway of our kitchen, the kitchen where I had made thousands of meals, holding a duffel bag I hadn't noticed before. "That's it?" I heard myself say, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. 38 years and that's it? He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, and for a moment I thought I saw something like guilt flicker across his face. But then he straightened his shoulders and said, "I need to be happy, Margaret. I've been unhappy for a long time." The water was still running. I could hear it splashing against the broken pieces of plate, a steady rhythm that seemed absurdly normal for such an abnormal moment. I wanted to ask him when exactly he had stopped being happy. Was it last year when we celebrated our anniversary at that restaurant downtown? Was it 5 years ago when we took that trip to the Grand Canyon? Was it the day we brought Daniel home from the hospital? But I didn't ask any of those questions. Instead, I turned off the faucet and dried my hands on the dish towel, the yellow one with sunflowers that my mother had given me before she died. I folded it carefully and placed it on the counter, buying myself a few seconds to process what was happening. "When did you meet her?" I asked. 6 months ago, at the gym." 6 months? Half a year of lies. Half a year of him coming home late, saying he was working on a big project at the office. Half a year of me believing him, trusting him, being the loyal wife I had always been. "Does Daniel know?" Richard's expression darkened. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." That was almost funny. He wanted to tell me first, as if telling your wife you're leaving her for a woman young enough to be your daughter required some sort of medal for decency. He left that night. I heard his car pull out of the driveway at 9:47 p.m. I know, because I was sitting in the dark living room, watching the headlights sweep across the wall as he backed out. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there in the silence of the house we had built together, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick and all the small sounds that suddenly seemed deafening. The first person I called was my sister Linda in Phoenix. It was late, almost 11 p.m., but I knew she would be awake. Linda had always been a night owl. "He left," I said when she answered. "Richard left me for a 28-year-old named Amber." Linda swore, a long string of creative profanities that would have made a sailor blush. Then she said, "I'm coming there. I'll get a flight tomorrow." "No," I said quickly. "I need to do this alone. I need to figure out what happens next." "What happens next is you get the best divorce lawyer in the state and you take him for everything he's worth." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised me. "We don't have much to take, you know that." And it was true. Richard and I had never been wealthy. We were comfortable, sure. We owned our house outright, a modest 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street that we had bought in 1989 for $87,000. We had savings, about $145,000 in various accounts. We had our retirement funds, his 401k and my small pension from 25 years of working as a school secretary. We weren't rich, but we had always been secure. Or so I thought. "Just promise me you'll see a lawyer," Linda said. "Promise me, Margaret." "I promise." I hung up and sat in the dark for another hour, thinking about all the years I had spent being Richard's wife. I had supported him through law school, even though we could barely afford it, working 2 jobs while he studied. I had raised our son, attended every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every school play. I had kept our house clean, cooked dinner every night, handled all the household finances because Richard said numbers gave him a headache. I had been a good wife. No, I had been an excellent wife. And it hadn't been enough. Daniel came to see me 3 days later. He knocked on the door even though he had a key, which should have been my first warning sign that something was different. When I opened the door, he was standing there with Jessica, both of them wearing expressions that looked practiced, like they had rehearsed this moment in the car.
"Hi, Mom," Daniel said, kissing my cheek. He was 36 years old, tall like his father, with the same dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples. "We wanted to check on you." I ushered them inside, grateful for the company. The house had been too quiet since Richard left. I had found myself talking to the walls, to the furniture, to my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. "I made coffee," I said, leading them to the kitchen, "and I had that lemon cake you like, Daniel." We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten countless family dinners. Jessica kept looking at Daniel, little glances that seemed to carry entire conversations. I poured coffee into 3 mugs, adding cream to Daniel's the way he liked it, black for Jessica. "So," Daniel said, wrapping his hands around his mug, "Dad called me. He told me about Amber." I felt my chest tighten. What did he say? That he's in love, that he's been unhappy for years, that he hopes we can all be adults about this. I took a sip of my coffee, burning my tongue. "And what did you say?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. I said I needed time to process it. "It's a lot, Mom. I mean, he's my dad, but you're my mom, and I don't want to take sides." "I'm not asking you to take sides." "I know, but this is complicated." He paused, glancing at Jessica again. "The thing is, Mom, Dad says you're going to make this divorce ugly. He says you're going to try to take everything." The words hit me like a slap. He said that? Richard said that? "He's worried about his future, Mom. He says you've always been good with money, that you'll know how to work the system." I stared at my son. This man I had grown inside my body, nursed, raised, loved with every fiber of my being. And he was sitting in my kitchen, repeating this father's lies as if they were truth. "Daniel," I said slowly, "I haven't even filed for divorce yet. I've barely processed the fact that your father left me. How could I possibly be planning to take everything?" Jessica spoke up for the first time. "Margaret, I think what Daniel's trying to say is that we want this to be fair. We don't want either of you to suffer financially." We. They were already a united front with Richard. They had already chosen their side. "Well," I said, hearing the ice creep into my voice, "you can tell your father that I will be fair. I'll take exactly what I'm entitled to under the law." Daniel nodded, looking relieved. "That's good, Mom. That's really good, because Dad is under a lot of stress right now and he doesn't need any additional drama." I wanted to laugh or scream or throw my coffee mug against the wall. Richard was under stress? Richard, who blew up our marriage for a woman barely older than his own son? Richard, who lied to me for 6 months? Richard was the one suffering. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and cut each of them a slice of lemon cake and listened to them talk about their lives as if nothing had changed. Jessica had gotten a promotion at work. Daniel was thinking about buying a new car. They were planning a vacation to Hawaii next spring. When they left, Daniel hugged me and said, "I love you, Mom. I just want you to be happy." I closed the door behind them and stood in the hallway looking at the family photos that lined the walls. Daniel as a baby. Daniel's first day at school. Daniel's high school graduation. Daniel's wedding, where I had worn a lavender dress and cried happy tears. I realized something in that moment. My son loved me, yes, but he loved his inheritance more. The first hint that something was deeply wrong came 2 weeks later when I went to the bank to withdraw $500 for groceries and household expenses. The teller, a young woman named Brittany, who I had known for years, looked at her computer screen and frowned. "Mrs. Henderson, there seems to be a problem with your account." My heart skipped. "What kind of problem?" "The joint account you share with your husband shows a balance of $2,847, but there were several large withdrawals made last week." I felt the blood drain from my face. "How large?" Brittany clicked through a few screens, her frown deepening. There were 3 withdrawals, one for $30,000 on Monday, one for $45,000 on Wednesday, and one for $67,000 on Friday. The numbers didn't make sense. I tried to do the math in my head, tried to understand how our savings of $145,000 had been reduced to less than $3,000. "That's $142,000, I said stupidly. "Yes, ma'am." "Where did it go?" Brittany looked uncomfortable. "I can print out the transaction details, but it looks like the money was transferred to another account, an account in your husband's name only." I sat down in one of the chairs near the window, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. Richard had taken everything. While I was dealing with the shock of him leaving, while I was trying to figure out how to move forward, he had systematically emptied our joint accounts. "Mrs. Henderson, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?"
I shook my head. "I need you to print out all the transactions from the past month. Everything. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every check." Brittany printed the papers, and I sat in that bank for an hour going through each line item. The truth was devastating. Richard hadn't just taken our savings. He had also taken money from the account we had set up for household expenses, leaving just enough to avoid overdraft fees. He had withdrawn cash from our emergency fund, the $15,000 we had saved for medical emergencies or unexpected repairs. He had taken everything we had built together in 38 years of marriage and moved it into an account where I couldn't touch it. I drove home in a daze, the papers clutched in my hand. When I got to the house, I went straight to our filing cabinet in the spare bedroom where we kept all our important documents. I pulled out the folder labeled Retirement and opened it with shaking hands. Richard's 401k statement showed a balance of $387,000. But there was a note attached, a letter from the financial company dated just 5 days ago. It informed him that his loan request for $100,000 had been approved, and the funds had been dispersed to his personal checking account. He had taken a loan against his own retirement, money that should have been protected, money that we both needed for our future. And he had done it without telling me. I sat on the floor of this spare bedroom, surrounded by papers and folders and the evidence of my husband's betrayal, and I finally cried. I cried for the 38 years I had wasted. I cried for the trust I had given so freely. I cried for the future I had imagined, the retirement we were supposed to share, the grandchildren we would spoil together. And when I was done crying, I picked up the phone and called the divorce lawyer Linda had recommended. Catherine Reynolds was everything I needed her to be: sharp, experienced, and absolutely ruthless. She sat across from me in her downtown office, a sleek, modern space with glass walls and leather furniture, and listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Margaret, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your husband is trying to hide assets before the divorce is finalized. What he's done is illegal, and we can prove it. What do we do? First, we file for divorce immediately. Second, we file an emergency motion to freeze all remaining assets. Third, we demand full financial disclosure. If he's taken money out of joint accounts without your permission, we can make a case for dissipation of marital assets.
What does that mean? It means the court will make him pay back what he stole, with interest. It means he doesn't get to hide money and then claim poverty in the divorce settlement. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. How long will this take? Months, probably. Maybe a year or more if he fights us. But Margaret, I need you to be strong. Your husband is going to play dirty. He's going to try to paint you as greedy, vindictive, unreasonable. He's going to use your son against you if he can. I thought about Daniel's visit, his careful neutrality, his concern for his father's stress. He's already doing that. Catherine nodded, unsurprised. Then we need to document everything. Every conversation, every text message, every email. If your son starts asking you for money or making unusual requests, I need to know about it. Why would Daniel ask me for money? She gave me a look that was part sympathy, part warning. Because your husband is probably telling you that you're trying to take everything, and your son might decide he needs to help his father by convincing you to be more generous. I wanted to believe she was wrong. I wanted to believe that my son wouldn't manipulate me like that. But deep down, I already knew better. The divorce papers were served to Richard at his new apartment, the one he shared with Amber. I wasn't there to see his reaction, but Daniel called me that evening, his voice tight with anger. "Mom, what on earth are you doing?" I was making dinner, a simple pasta dish for one. The kitchen felt enormous without Richard's presence, every surface a reminder of how alone I was. "I'm filing for divorce, Daniel. What did you think I was going to do?" "Dad said you're asking for 75% of everything? He said you're trying to destroy him financially." I stirred the pasta, watching the noodles swirl in the boiling water. "Your father took $142,000 from our joint accounts without telling me. He took a $100,000 loan against his retirement. He left me with less than $3,000 to live on. And I'm the one trying to destroy him?" There was a pause. "He said he needed to secure his future. He said you would understand eventually." "Daniel, whose side are you on?" "I'm not on anyone's side. I just want my parents to act like adults instead of like vindictive children." The words stung more than they should have. I had never been vindictive in my life. I had spent 38 years supporting Richard, supporting our family, putting everyone else's needs before my own. And now I was being painted as the villain because I dared to protect myself?
"Daniel," I said quietly, "I'm going to hang up now. When you're ready to hear my side of this, you know where to find me." I disconnected before he could respond and stood in my kitchen, listening to the pasta boil over. I turned off the stove and watched the water hiss and steam on the burner. I realized I wasn't hungry anymore. That night, lying in bed alone, I thought about all the times I had given Daniel money over the years. When he needed a down payment for his first apartment, I had given him $8,000 from my own savings. When his car broke down and repairs would cost $3,500, I had paid for it. When he and Jessica wanted to go on a European vacation but couldn't quite afford it, I had quietly transferred $2,000 into their account. I had never asked for thanks. I had never kept a running tally. I had just loved my son and wanted him to be happy. Now I wondered if that love had been one-sided all along. 3 weeks after I filed for divorce, Jessica called me. Not Daniel. Jessica, which should have been my first warning sign. "Margaret, hi, how are you holding up?" Her voice was too bright, too cheerful, like she was calling to chat about the weather instead of my imploding life. I was sitting in the living room, going through old photo albums, trying to figure out which memories were real and which had been elaborate lies. "I'm managing," I said carefully. Good. That's really good. Listen, Daniel and I were talking, and we wanted to invite you to dinner this Friday. We haven't seen you in a while, and we miss you." I flipped a page in the album, finding a photo of Richard and me on our 10th anniversary. We looked happy. We looked in love. I wondered if he had already been thinking about leaving me even then, searching for someone younger, someone who wouldn't remind him of his own mortality. "That's sweet of you," I said, "but I'm not really in the mood for socializing right now." "Oh, come on, Margaret. It'll be good for you to get out of the house. And we want to talk to you about something important, something that could really help you during this difficult time." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "What kind of something?" "Just come to dinner. Friday at 7. We'll make your favorite, that chicken parmesan you love. Please?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. Friday evening, I drove to Daniel and Jessica's house, a tidy 2-story colonial in a subdivision across town. I had helped them with the down payment, $25,000 that I had saved from years of working part-time jobs in addition to my secretary position. I had been so proud when they bought that house, so happy to see my son settled and secure. Now, pulling into their driveway, I felt nothing but dread. Jessica answered the door wearing a dress I didn't recognize, something expensive-looking in soft gray cashmere. "Margaret, you look wonderful. Come in, come in." Daniel was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He turned when I entered and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Mom. Glad you could make it." The table was set with their good china, candles flickering in crystal holders. It looked less like a casual family dinner and more like a business meeting disguised as hospitality. We made small talk while Jessica finished preparing the food. Daniel told me about a project at work, something about software development that I didn't understand. Jessica talked about her sister's pregnancy, the baby shower they were planning. I nodded and smiled and felt like I was watching a play where I didn't know my lines. Finally, after we had eaten the chicken parmesan and Jessica had served dessert, a store-bought tiramisu that she pretended she had made herself, Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you about the divorce." I set down my fork. I thought we might. Jessica reached across the table and patted my hand. "We're worried about you, Margaret. This whole thing with Richard has been so hard on everyone, and we don't want to see you make decisions you'll regret." What decisions would those be? Daniel exchanged a look with Jessica, and I recognized it immediately. It was the same look they had shared in my kitchen weeks ago, the look that said they had already planned this entire conversation. "Your lawyer is asking for too much. Dad can't afford to give you 75% of the assets. It'll bankrupt him." I felt a surge of anger so powerful that it made my hands shake. "Your father stole $142,000 from our joint accounts. He took a $100,000 loan against his retirement. He left me with almost nothing, and you're concerned about him going bankrupt?" "He didn't steal anything," Jessica said quickly. "He just secured his future. You have to understand, Margaret, Amber is young. She wants children. Richard needs to be able to provide for a new family."
The words hung in the air like poison gas. Provide for a new family. As if I hadn't been his family for 38 years. As if our son, sitting across from me, wasn't the family he should be concerned about. "So what are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Daniel leaned forward. "We think you should settle for 40% of the assets. It's fair, and it'll allow Dad to move on with his life without financial ruin." 40%? Yes, it's more than generous considering everything. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the boy I had raised. This wasn't the man I had sacrificed for, worked for, given everything to. This was someone who had calculated the value of my 38 years of marriage and decided it was worth 40% of assets that should have been equally mine. And what do I get in return for this generosity? I asked. Jessica brightened. Well, that's the exciting part. We've been talking to Richard, and he's willing to sign over the house to you free and clear. You'd own it outright, no mortgage, no strings attached. I almost laughed. The house that I already owned half of. The house that was already paid off. They were offering me something I already possessed, as if it were a gift. And what if his retirement, his 401k, the money he took from our accounts? Daniel's jaw tightened. He keeps his retirement, and the money he transferred was partially his, Mom. You can't expect him to hand over everything he's worked for. I worked for 25 years too, Daniel. I worked while raising you. I worked while keeping house, cooking, cleaning, managing every aspect of our family life. Where's the value in that? That's different, Jessica said, her voice taking on an edge. You chose to be a homemaker. That was your choice. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the floor. I need to use the bathroom. I walked down the hallway, past the family photos hanging on the walls, my grandchildren, Daniel and Jessica's wedding, pictures of holidays and vacations I had helped finance. I locked the bathroom door and stood at the sink, gripping the cold porcelain until my knuckles turned white. They had brought me here to manipulate me. They had cooked my favorite meal and set a beautiful table and acted loving and concerned, all so they could pressure me into giving up what I was legally entitled to. And the worst part? They thought I was stupid enough to fall for it. I splashed cold water on my face, dried my hands, and walked back to the dining room. Daniel and Jessica looked up expectantly, no doubt thinking they had worn me down. I'm going to say this once, I said, standing at the head of the table. I am not settling for 40%. I am not accepting your father's generous offer. I'm going to fight for every penny I deserve. And if that makes me greedy or vindictive in your eyes, then so be it. Daniel stood up. Mom, you're being unreasonable. No, Daniel, I'm being smart. Something I should have been years ago. If you do this, you'll destroy this family, Jessica hissed. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Your father already destroyed this family when he emptied our bank accounts and moved in with a woman who wasn't even born when we got married. I'm just picking up the pieces. As I drove home, my phone started buzzing with text messages. Daniel, Jessica, even Richard, who hadn't contacted me directly since he left. All of them telling me I was making a mistake. All of them trying to guilt me into submission. I blocked all 3 numbers and drove home in blessed silence. The court date was set for 3 months later. Catherine told me to prepare for battle, and she wasn't exaggerating. Richard's lawyer filed motion after motion, each one claiming that I was unstable, vindictive, trying to punish Richard for falling out of love. They submitted a psychological evaluation that I had never consented to, one that claimed I showed signs of narcissistic tendencies and financial manipulation. They brought up every argument we had ever had, every disagreement, every moment of tension in 38 years of marriage, and painted me as a controlling, difficult woman who had made Richard's life miserable. Catherine fought back with documentation, bank statements showing that I had been the primary financial manager of our household, that I had never taken money without Richard's knowledge, that every major purchase had been discussed and agreed upon by both of us, tax returns showing my income from years of work, testimonies from friends and family, not Daniel, never Daniel, who swore that I had been a devoted wife and mother. But the worst blow came 6 weeks before the court date, when Daniel and Jessica filed an affidavit supporting Richard's claims. In it, They stated that I had always been controlling about money and that I had frequently made Richard feel inadequate about his earnings. They claimed that I had emotionally manipulated Daniel throughout his childhood, using money as a tool to maintain control over the family. Every word was a lie. Every sentence was designed to paint me as a monster.
I sat in Catherine's office, reading the affidavit with tears streaming down my face. How could he do this? How could my own son do this to me? Catherine's expression was grim. Because your husband promised him something. Money, most likely. Maybe a larger inheritance. Maybe just the guarantee that he'll be taken care of when Richard dies. But I would never cut Daniel off. I would never stop being his mother. Richard doesn't care about that. He's using your son as a weapon, and your son is letting him. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for Daniel, the birthday parties I had thrown when we couldn't afford them, the college tuition I had helped pay by working extra hours, the down payment on his house, the car repairs, the vacation money, the countless small and large gifts I had given freely, never expecting anything in return except love. And this was my return, a legal document full of lies filed by the child I had devoted my life to. What do we do? I asked. We fight harder, Catherine said, and we document every lie they've told. 2 weeks before the court date, something happened that changed everything. I was at home, sorting through more old papers, when I found a manila envelope tucked in the back of Richard's filing cabinet. It was labeled, "Personal, do not open," in his handwriting. I should have respected that. The old Margaret, the trusting wife, would have put it back without a second thought. But the new Margaret, the woman who had been lied to and stolen from and betrayed, opened it without hesitation. Inside were bank statements for an account I had never seen before, an account in Richard's name and Daniel's name, an account that had been opened 8 years ago and had regular deposits, sometimes $500, sometimes $1,000, sometimes more. The current balance was $67,000. I sat on the floor staring at the papers, trying to understand what I was seeing. Richard had been secretly giving Daniel money for 8 years, money I hadn't known about, money from our joint accounts, presumably, money that should have been discussed and agreed upon. But that wasn't all. Clipped to the bank statements was a handwritten note from Daniel dated just 3 months ago. "Dad, thanks for the $5,000. Jessica and I really appreciate it. I know Mom doesn't understand how expensive everything is these days. You're the only one who gets it. When you and Amber are settled, we should all get together for dinner. I think she sounds great." I read the note 3 times, each reading feeling like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Daniel had known about Amber before Richard left me. Daniel had met her, approved of her, probably even encouraged the affair, and he had been taking money from his father the entire time, money that came from the accounts I had helped build. My son hadn't been neutral. He had never been neutral. He had chosen his father's side years ago, probably the moment that secret account was opened. I took photos of everything with my phone and called Catherine. "I have something you need to see," I said. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, a windowless room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable wooden benches. Richard sat at one table with his lawyer, a polished man in an expensive suit. I sat at the other table with Catherine, wearing a navy blue dress that Linda had helped me pick out. Daniel and Jessica were in the gallery, sitting behind Richard. When I walked in, Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge was a woman in her 50s, Judge Patricia Hammond, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like she had seen every kind of divorce drama she imagined and was tired of all of it. Richard's lawyer went first, laying out their case. He painted Richard as a man who had been emotionally starved in his marriage, who had tried for years to make it work, who had finally found happiness with someone who appreciated him. He talked about the dissipation of marital assets claim as if it were a personal vendetta on my part,
an attempt to punish Richard for daring to leave me. Then he called Daniel to the stand. My son walked up to the witness box, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. I wondered if he felt even a flicker of guilt. "Mr. Henderson," Richard's lawyer said smoothly, "can you tell the court about your mother's relationship with money?" Daniel cleared his throat. "My mother has always been very controlling about finances. Growing up, she made all the decisions about what we could and couldn't afford. My father worked hard, but she was the one who managed the money, and she often made him feel like he wasn't contributing enough. It was such a careful lie, rehearsed and polished. The truth was that Richard had given me control of the finances because he hated dealing with bills and budgets. He had asked me to manage our money. But Daniel made it sound like I had seized power, like I had emasculated his father through spreadsheets and bank statements. "And did your mother ever use money to manipulate you?" the lawyer asked. "Yes. She would give me money for things, but then later she would bring it up as if she owed me, like she was keeping track of every dollar she ever spent on me." I felt Catherine's hand on my arm, a silent warning not to react. But inside, I was screaming. I had never, not once in 36 years, thrown money in Daniel's face. I had given freely, joyfully, without expectation of repayment. "No further questions," Richard's lawyer said, looking satisfied. Catherine stood up, and I saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. "Mr. Henderson, you said your mother kept track of money she gave you. Do you keep track of money you receive?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Do you have a bank account with your father?" The color drained from Daniel's face. That's not relevant to this case." "I'll decide what's relevant," Judge Hammond said sharply. "Answer the question." "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "My father and I have a joint account." Catherine held up the bank statements I had found. "This account, established 8 years ago, currently has a balance of $67,000, all deposited by your father. Isn't that correct?" "Yes." "And did your mother know about this account?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "No." "So while you've testified that your mother was controlling about money, your father was secretly giving you thousands of dollars without her knowledge. Does that seem like the behavior of a man who is being financially controlled?" "Objection," Richard's lawyer shot to his feet. "This line of questioning is irrelevant to the division of marital assets." Judge Hammond leaned forward. "Overruled. I want to hear this. Continue, Ms. Reynolds." Catherine picked up another document. "Mr. Henderson, I have here a note you wrote to your father dated 3 months ago. Would you like to read it to the court, or shall I?" Daniel looked at his father, then at the judge, then back at Catherine. "I don't remember what it says." "Allow me to refresh your memory. Dad, thanks for the $5,000. Jessica and I really appreciate it. I know Mom doesn't understand how expensive everything is these days. You're the only one who gets it. When you and Amber are settled, we should all get together for dinner. I think she sounds great." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Hammond's expression had gone from tired to furious. "Mr. Henderson," she said coldly, "are you telling me that you knew about your father's relationship with Miss Anderson before he left your mother?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded. "And you've been receiving regular payments from your father, payments that came from marital assets, while testifying that your mother was the one who was financially manipulative." Daniel looked at his father again, but Richard was staring at the table. "You may step down," Judge Hammond said, her voice like ice. Catherine called me to the stand next. I told my story simply, without embellishment. I talked about the 38 years of marriage, the 2 jobs I had worked to put Richard through law school, the way I had managed our household finances, not because I wanted control, but because Richard had asked me to, the $142,000 he had taken without my knowledge, the retirement loan, the secret account with Daniel while my husband managed household expenses in good faith. When Catherine sat down, Richard's lawyer tried to cross-examine me, but his heart wasn't in it. The evidence was too damning. The lies had been exposed. Judge Hammond called for a recess, and when she returned 30 minutes later, her expression told me everything I needed to know. "I'm going to be very clear," she said, looking directly at Richard. "Mr. Henderson, you systematically emptied marital accounts in anticipation of divorce proceedings. You transferred $142,000 without your wife's knowledge or consent. You took a loan against retirement assets that should have been protected, and you maintained a secret account with your son, using marital funds while your wife managed household expenses in good faith." She looked down at her notes, then back up at Richard. "This is one of the clearest cases of dissipation of marital assets I've seen in my 15 years on the bench. The law is very clear about this, Mr. Henderson. You don't get to hide money and then benefit from hiding it." Richard's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, if I may—" "You may not." Judge Hammond's voice was sharp. "I'm not finished. Mr. Henderson, you will return the full $142,000 to marital accounts immediately. The $67,000 in the joint account with your son will also be considered marital property and divided accordingly. As for the 401k loan, that debt will be assigned solely to you, and it will not reduce the value of your retirement account in the division of assets." I felt Catherine squeeze my hand under the table. "Furthermore," Judge Hammond continued, "Mrs. Henderson is awarded 60% of all marital assets, including the house, retirement accounts, and any other properties or investments. Mr. Henderson, you are ordered to pay Mrs. Henderson's legal fees in full. This court finds that your actions were deliberate, deceptive, and designed to deprive your wife of her rightful share of marital property." Richard's face had gone completely white. His lawyer was shuffling papers, looking for some loophole, some way to object, but there was none. The evidence was too clear.
"Do you understand this ruling, Mr. Henderson?" Judge Hammond asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Good. You have 30 days to comply with all financial transfers. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the room. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high. Catherine was grinning like she had just won the lottery, which in a way she had. Her 15% contingency fee would be substantial. But I didn't care about that. I cared about the fact that I had stood up for myself and won. In the hallway, Daniel was waiting. Jessica stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression hostile. "Mom," Daniel said, taking a step toward me, "can we talk? I don't think we have anything to say to each other. Please, I made a mistake. I know I did, but you're my mother. We can work through this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the calculation in his eyes. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry he had been caught. He was sorry that the money he thought he would inherit had just been divided in my favor. "Daniel," I said calmly, "you stood up in court and lied about me. You called me controlling and manipulative. You took money from your father while knowing he was having an affair. You knew he was planning to leave me, and you said nothing." "I was trying to stay neutral." "No," I said, my voice rising. "You were trying to protect your inheritance. You were trying to make sure that when your father died, you would get as much as possible. And you were willing to throw me under the bus to make that happen." Jessica stepped forward. "Margaret, you're being unfair. Daniel was caught in the middle of a difficult situation." I turned to her, and I must have looked terrifying because she actually took a step back. "You don't get to speak to me about fairness. You sat in my kitchen and helped orchestrate the dinner where you tried to manipulate me into accepting 40% of my own assets. You filed an affidavit full of lies. You supported every single betrayal." "We were thinking of the family." "No," I said coldly. "You were thinking of yourselves, and now you're realizing that your gamble didn't pay off."
I walked past them, Catherine at my side. Behind me, I heard Daniel call out, "Mom, please!" But I didn't turn around. I had spent 36 years turning around, going back, giving in, putting their needs before mine. I was done turning around. The fallout was immediate and dramatic. Richard had 30 days to return the money, but he didn't have it. He had spent a good portion of it on his new life with Amber, a luxury apartment, a new car for her, expensive dinners, and trips. He had been living like a man who had already gotten away with his theft. Now he had to face the consequences. He tried to borrow money from friends. He tried to take out a loan. He even tried to ask his own mother, who was 85 and living on a fixed income. But word had gotten out about the court case, about what he had done, and suddenly Richard Henderson, respected accountant, was persona non grata in his own social circle. Finally, 3 days before the deadline, he called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Margaret," he said, and his voice was hoarse, desperate. "I need your help." I laughed, a sound that held no humor. "You need my help." I don't have the money. I spent it. I can't pay you back in 30 days. "That sounds like a problem you should discuss with your lawyer." "Please, Margaret, if I don't pay by the deadline, the judge will hold me in contempt. I could lose my accounting license. I could lose everything." "You already lost everything, Richard. You just didn't realize it yet." There was a long silence. Then he said, "Amber left me." I sat down on the couch, processing this information. What? "She left 2 days ago. She said she didn't sign up for this, for a man who was broke and disgraced. She took the car I bought her and moved out. She's already seeing someone else, someone younger, someone with money." I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied that the woman who had destroyed my marriage had abandoned him the moment things got difficult. But mostly, I just felt tired. "Richard," I said quietly, "that's what you threw away 38 years of marriage for. A woman who loved your money, not you." I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Your apology doesn't change anything. You still have to return the money." "I don't have it, but I have the deed to the house. If you take the house outright, if you waive the cash payment, I can start over. I can rebuild my life." I thought about it exactly 3 seconds. "No. Margaret, you wanted to leave me with nothing, Richard. You systematically stole from our accounts. You used our son against me. You hired lawyers to paint me as a vindictive monster. And now you want mercy."
Please, sell your car. Sell your furniture. Sell whatever you need to sell. Borrow from your girlfriend's replacement if you can find someone that desperate. But you will pay me what you owe me, because that's what the law says, and that's what's right. I hung up before he could respond. Richard met the deadline, barely. He sold his luxury car and bought a 15-year-old sedan. He moved out of his apartment and into a studio half the size. He borrowed money from his brother in Colorado, money he would have to pay back with interest. The $142,000 was deposited back into an account in my name only, along with an additional $40,000 from the joint account with Daniel, which represented my share of that money. Daniel tried to fight the seizure of funds from his account, claiming it was a gift and therefore not subject to the court's ruling. But Judge Hammond shut that down immediately, pointing out that the money had come from marital assets and had been hidden deliberately. Daniel lost $40,000 of what he considered his money, and I gained a son who wouldn't speak to me. But I'd gained something else too. My freedom. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I sold the house on Maple Street. It held too many memories, too many ghosts of the life I thought I had. I bought a smaller place in a different part of town, a cozy 2-bedroom cottage with a garden where I could plant flowers and vegetables. Linda flew in from Phoenix to help me move. We spent a week packing up 38 years of accumulated belongings, and with each box I sealed, I felt lighter. "What are you going to do with all this money?" Linda asked, wrapping dishes in newspaper. I had walked away from the marriage with the house proceeds, $182,000 in cash, half of Richard's retirement account, and my own small pension. After taxes and legal fees, I had roughly $450,000 to my name. Not a fortune, but enough to live comfortably. "I'm going to live," I said simply. "I'm going to travel. I'm going to take classes. I'm going to do all the things I put off for 38 years because I was taking care of everyone else." "What about Daniel?" Linda asked carefully. I taped up a box and labeled it "Kitchen, Donate." "What about him?" "Are you ever going to forgive him?" I thought about that for a long moment. Maybe. Someday. But he's going to have to earn it. And I'm not holding my breath. The truth was, Daniel had called a few times since the divorce finalized, always asking for things: help with the down payment on a new car, money for Jessica's medical bills, a loan to cover unexpected expenses. Each time, I said no. Each time, he got angry. The last time he called, he had yelled, "You've changed, Mom. You're not the person you used to be." "You're right," I had said calmly. "I'm better." And I was. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what everyone else needed. I was learning to say no without guilt, to set boundaries without apology. 1 year after Richard left me, I was sitting in a cafe in Tuscany, drinking espresso and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. I had booked a 3-week trip through Italy, something I had always wanted to do, but had never been able to afford. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Mom, it's Daniel. I got a new phone. Can we talk?" I looked at the message for a long time, watching the words blur as the sun sank lower. Then I turned off my phone and ordered another espresso. Maybe someday I would talk to Daniel. Maybe someday he would understand what he had done, would offer a real apology, would show genuine remorse instead of just regret at getting caught. Maybe someday we could rebuild some version of a mother-son relationship. But that day wasn't today. Today, I was in Italy, living the life I had always dreamed of. I was free from manipulation, free from obligation, free from the weight of always putting others first. I had learned the hardest lesson of my life: that love without respect is just exploitation in disguise. That being a good mother, a good wife, a good person doesn't mean sacrificing yourself completely. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who only value what you can give them. 2 years later, I was back in the States, living in my cottage, tending my garden. I had taken up painting and had sold a few pieces at a local gallery. I had joined a book club and made new friends who knew me as Margaret, not as someone's wife or someone's mother. I had dated a few men, nothing serious, just enjoying the companionship without the pressure of building a life together. I was happy. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there, alone. No Jessica, no agenda visible in his eyes, though I had learned to look deeper. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Daniel, can I come in?" I considered saying no. I considered closing the door and going back to the watercolor I had been working on. But curiosity, that old familiar friend, made me step aside.
We sat in my living room, Daniel perched awkwardly on the edge of my new couch, me in my reading chair by the window. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm well. And you?" "Struggling," he admitted. "Jessica and I separated. She's filing for divorce." I felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, not quite satisfaction. "I'm sorry to hear that." "She was having an affair with a guy from her office. Turns out she'd been using money from our joint account to take trips with him. I had no idea until I saw the credit card statements." The irony wasn't lost on me, and I could see from Daniel's expression that it wasn't lost on him either. "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it. Whatever he had done to me, I didn't wish that kind of betrayal on anyone. When I found out, I thought about you, about what you went through, about how He stopped, his voice breaking, about how I made it worse. I waited. I had learned patience in the past 2 years. "I was an asshole, Mom. I was a complete asshole. I chose Dad's side because I thought it would benefit me. I thought if I supported him, if I helped him, he would remember that when he died. I thought I was being smart, protecting my future. And now? Now I realize I traded my mother for money I haven't even gotten yet. And Dad," he laughed bitterly, "Dad is dating wife number 3, some woman named Crystal who's 25. He doesn't return my calls anymore. I think he blames me for the court case, for losing the money. So I lost you. I'm losing Jessica. And I never really had Dad." He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I came here to apologize. Not because I want something from you, not because I think you owe me forgiveness, just because you deserve to hear it. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for every lie I told, every time I chose money over you. Every moment I made you feel like you didn't matter. You deserved better. You deserve better." I sat there, looking at this man who was my son, this stranger who shared my DNA. Part of me wanted to hug him, to forgive him immediately, to fall back into the pattern of being the mother who fixed everything, but I had learned to resist that impulse. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I appreciate it, and I accept your apology." Hope flared in his eyes. "Does that mean—" "It means I accept your apology. It doesn't mean everything is fixed. It doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. It means this is the first step on a very long road, and I don't know where that road ends." The hope dimmed a little, but he nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" I leaned forward. "Daniel, you destroyed my trust. You lied in court. You supported your father while he stole from me. You chose money over integrity, over family, over basic human decency. An apology is a start, but it's only a start. What do I need to do? Be honest. Be consistent. Don't ask me for anything. Don't expect anything. Just show up over time and prove that you've changed. Maybe in a year, maybe in 5 years, maybe never, we'll have something that resembles the relationship we used to have. But it will never be the same, Daniel. You broke something, and broken things never mend perfectly." He nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Are you happy? Really happy?" I thought about my cottage,
my garden, my paintings, my new friends, my freedom. I thought about the trips I had taken, the books I had read, the life I had built from the ruins of my marriage. Yes, I said, I'm happy, happier than I've been in years. I'm glad, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. You deserve that. He stood to leave, and at the door he turned back. Can I come by again sometime? Just to talk? Call first, and we'll see. Daniel did call. Not every week, but regularly. Sometimes we would have coffee in town. Sometimes he would help me with repairs around the cottage. Sometimes we would just sit in my garden and talk about nothing important. He never asked for money. He never pressured me. He just showed up consistently, trying to rebuild something he had broken. I still didn't completely trust him. I'm not sure I ever would, but I was willing to see where this road led. 3 years after my divorce, I ran into Richard at the grocery store. He was in the produce section, looking significantly older than I remembered, his hair completely gray, his face lined with stress and age. Margaret, he said, looking startled. Richard. We stood there awkwardly, both of us holding shopping baskets, surrounded by apples and bananas, and other people living their normal lives. You look good. Happy. I am. I heard you've been traveling, that you sold some paintings at a gallery. I was surprised he knew. Daniel told you? No, we don't really talk anymore. I heard it from Linda, actually. She sent me a Christmas card with some photos. You were in Paris, I think. Barcelona, but close.
He nodded, and I could see him struggling with something. Finally, he said, I made a mistake, Margaret. A huge mistake. Leaving you was the worst decision of my life. I didn't say anything. I didn't owe him comfort. Amber, Crystal, all of them, they weren't real. They were just reflections of what I thought I wanted. Youth, excitement, a do-over. But none of them knew me. None of them cared about me. They cared about what I could give them. And when you couldn't give them anything anymore, they left, I said, not unkindly. Yes. He looked down at his basket, which held frozen dinners and beer, the basket of a man living alone. I threw away 38 years of real partnership for something shiny and new, and now I have nothing. You have yourself, I said. That's not nothing. He laughed, a sad sound. Philosophical Margaret, always looking for the lesson. There's always a lesson, Richard. The question is whether you're willing to learn it. I moved past him toward the checkout, but he called after me. Margaret, do you think, could we maybe have coffee sometime, just to talk? I turned back and looked at this man who had been my husband, my partner, the father of my child. This man who had betrayed me so thoroughly that I had been forced to rebuild my entire life from scratch. This man who had taught me, inadvertently, the most important lesson I had ever learned, that I was stronger than I ever knew. No, Richard, I said gently. I don't think so. His face fell, and I felt a twinge of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. Take care of yourself, I said, and I meant it. Not because I still loved him, but because I had learned that holding on to anger was like holding on to poison. You're the one who gets hurt. I left him there in the produce section and went to pay for my groceries. In my basket were ingredients for the dinner party I was hosting that evening. Fresh vegetables, good wine, ingredients for homemade pasta. My new friends were coming over, people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. 5 years after my divorce, Daniel called me with news. Mom, I wanted you to hear this from me first. I'm engaged. I was in my studio,
working on a commissioned piece, a landscape of the Tuscan countryside I had fallen in love with. I set down my brush and gave him my full attention. "Congratulations! Who's the lucky person?" "Her name's Rachel. She's a teacher. We met at a grief support group. We were both dealing with divorce. She's kind, Mom. Really kind. And she knows everything about what I did. I told her all of it, and she didn't run away." I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Hope. Real hope, not the calculating kind. "I'm happy for you, Daniel. There's more. We're having a small wedding, just close family and friends. And I was hoping, I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you come? Would you walk me down the aisle?" In the old days, I would have said yes immediately. I would have put aside any hurt feelings, any lingering resentment, and focused on being the mother my son needed. But I had learned to pause, to think, to consider what I wanted, not just what others expected. "Can I meet Rachel first?" I asked. "Of course, absolutely. How about dinner next week?" Rachel was nothing like Jessica. She was warm where Jessica had been cold, genuine where Jessica had been calculating. She taught 3rd grade and talked about her students with real affection. She asked me about my art, my travels, my life, and actually listened to the answers. Over dinner, she said, "Daniel told me about what happened during the divorce. I want you to know that I think what he did was horrible, and I'm glad he's spending every day trying to be better." Daniel reached for her hand. "I don't deserve her." "Probably not," Rachel said with a smile, "but you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to." I liked her. More than that, I trusted her. And trust, I had learned, was the most valuable currency in any relationship. "I'll come to the wedding," I told Daniel, "and I would be honored to walk you down the aisle." The wedding was small, held in Rachel's parents' backyard on a beautiful September afternoon. I wore a dress I had bought in Rome, soft blue silk that made me feel elegant and confident. When it was time, Daniel offered me his arm, and we walked together across the grass toward the altar where Rachel waited. As we walked, he whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for not giving up on me completely."
"I'm your mother," I said quietly. "I'll never give up on you completely, but I'll also never let you take advantage of me again." "I know, and I'm grateful for both." I placed his hand in Rachel's and took my seat in the front row. As I watched them exchange vows, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly. Forgiveness is a process, not a destination, but acceptance. Acceptance that people can change, that mistakes can be learned from, that broken relationships can be rebuilt into something different but still valuable. After the ceremony, during the reception, Richard appeared. He hadn't been invited, but he stood at the edge of the property, watching from a distance. He looked older, smaller somehow, like he had shrunk in on himself. Daniel saw him and his jaw tightened. Should I tell him to leave? I looked at this man who had once been my everything, who had reduced himself to nothing in pursuit of something he could never find, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. Just nothing. "Let him stay," I said. "Let him see what real love looks like." That night, back in my cottage under the stars, I thought about the journey I had taken. From a woman who defined herself by her relationships, wife, mother, caretaker, to a woman who knew her own worth, independent of anyone else. I thought about the $450,000 I had fought for, money that had represented so much more than its numerical value. It had been my self-respect, my dignity, my refusal to be erased. I had spent some of it on travel, on experiences,
on building a life that brought me joy. The rest was safely invested, growing slowly but steadily. I didn't need much. I had my cottage, my art, my friends, my slowly rebuilding relationship with Daniel. I had learned that betrayal, while devastating, doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning, the catalyst, the moment when you finally wake up and realize that you deserve better than you've been accepting. I had learned that family loyalty is important, but self-respect is essential. That you can love someone and still set boundaries with them. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or returning to the status quo. Most importantly, I had learned that it's never too late to start over. At 61, when Richard left, I thought my life was over. At 66, sitting in my garden, I knew my life had just begun. 7 years after my divorce, I received a letter from Richard. It came in the mail, handwritten on nice stationery, the kind you buy when you want to make an impression. "Dear Margaret," it began, "I am writing this letter because my doctor told me I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I have 6 months, maybe less. I'm not writing to ask for sympathy or forgiveness. I'm writing because I need to say some things before I die, and you deserve to hear them. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it because I was afraid of getting old. I was afraid of being ordinary. I was afraid that my one life was slipping away and I hadn't really lived. So I made a catastrophically stupid decision, and I've spent every day since then regretting it. You built a beautiful life after I left. I've watched from a distance, not stalking, just occasionally hearing things from mutual friends. You're happy. You're whole. You're everything I'm not. I'm not asking for anything, Margaret. I just wanted you to know that you won. You won at life, at happiness, at figuring out what actually matters. I lost it all, and I deserve to lose it. I hope these last 7 years have been everything you wanted them to be. With love and regret, Richard." I read the letter 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold beside me. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He had made his choices and I had made mine. His regret didn't change anything. It didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal or the years I had lost believing his lies. But it did confirm something I had suspected, that the life he was chasing didn't exist. That youth and excitement and newness are poor substitutes for partnership, respect, and genuine love. 6 months later, I received a call from Daniel. Richard had died. The funeral would be small. Did I want to come? I thought about it for exactly 1 minute. Then I said, no, but thank you for asking. Now, at 68 years old, I wake up every morning in my cottage and feel grateful. Grateful for the second chance I fought for. Grateful for the strength I discovered. Grateful for the life I built from the ruins of my marriage. I paint most days, selling enough work to supplement my retirement income. I travel when I want to, usually alone, sometimes with Linda or my book club friends. I have dinner with Daniel and Rachel regularly. And I'm building a relationship with my grandson, little Thomas, who is 3 years old and calls me Grandma Maggie. I date occasionally, though I'm no hurry to remarry. I've learned to enjoy my own company, to value my independence, to protect my peace. Sometimes people ask me if I'm lonely. I tell them no. Loneliness and solitude are different things. Loneliness is what I felt in my marriage, surrounded by people, but fundamentally unseen. Solitude is what I have now, the freedom to be fully myself, without apology or compromise. I'm not bitter, I'm not angry, I'm just free. And that freedom is worth more than all the money I fought for, all the years I lost, all the pain I endured. I learned the hardest way possible that you teach people how to treat you. That if you don't value yourself, no one else will. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do
is walk away. That betrayal can be a gift in disguise, a wake-up call, a catalyst for becoming who you were always meant to be. My message to anyone reading this, anyone who feels trapped or taken advantage of or diminished by the people who are supposed to love them, you are worth fighting for. Your dignity matters. Your happiness matters. Your peace matters. And it's never, ever too late to reclaim your life. I did it at 61. You can do it at any age. Stand up. Fight back, walk away if you need to. Build something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. And then live, really live. Not for anyone else, but for yourself. Because in the end, that's the only revenge that matters. Living well, being happy, and knowing that you saved yourself when no one else would. I am Margaret Henderson. I gave everything to my family, and they betrayed me. And I survived. No, I did more than survive. I thrived. And so can you.
Sister, you know what hurts the most? My husband left me for a younger woman and then came back begging for help when she suddenly vanished. I'm sharing the story with you because only another woman understands this kind of pain, this kind of betrayal. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave any comment you want, just to let me know you're here, listening. Thank you, sister, for being with me.